It's Wednesday, October 2nd. I'm going to do the video in bed because I'm not feeling very good today. I hope you're doing good. Hope you're healthy and happy and that everything's going good in your life. I want to continue reading from the Imitate Their Faith book and finishing up on Ruth. See if I can see where we had stopped. That classical music is epic. Change the channel. Alright. So remember last week we learned that Ruth's husband had died. And that was Naomi's son. So she grew closer to her mother-in-law. So let's continue to see how her journey. Also, Ruth was not a Israelite. She was. Let me see if I can. She was a Moabite woman. So Jehovah was not a god that she had worshipped, but she did learn about him through her husband and her mother-in-law. So let's continue to read. This is like classical. It's not too chill. That's better. Some good old jazz. Alright. You might not know this, but your dad used to study jazz guitar years ago, almost 10 years ago. I love me some jazz. Alright. We were on paragraph 12, The Loyal Love of Ruth. So Ruth and Naomi are traveling back to Jerusalem. So, alright. As the miles stretched out behind the three widows, another concern began weighing on Naomi. She thought of the two women and her sons. She could not bear the thought of adding to their burdens now. If they left their homeland and came with her, what could she do for them in Bethlehem? Finally, Naomi spoke up. Go, return each one to the house of her mother. May Jehovah exercise loving kindness toward you, just as you have exercised it toward the men now dead and toward me. She also expressed a hope that Jehovah would reward them with new husbands and new lives. Then she kissed them, the account says, and they began to raise their voices and weep. It is not hard to see why Ruth and Orpah felt so attached to this kind-hearted and unselfish woman. Both of them kept insisting, "No, but with you we shall return to your people." Naomi was not so easily persuaded, though. She reasoned forcefully that there was little that she could do for them in Israel, since she had no husband to provide for her, no sons for them to marry, and no prospects of either. She revealed that her inability to care for them was a source of real bitterness to her. With Orpah, Naomi's words hit home. She had family there in Moab, a mother and a home that was waiting for her. It really did seem more practical to remain in Moab. So, with a heavy heart, she kissed Naomi goodbye and turned away. I love this song. What about Ruth? Naomi's arguments applied to her as well. Yet we read, as for Ruth, she stuck with her. Perhaps Naomi had resumed walking on the road when she noticed that Ruth was trailing behind her. She remonstrated, "Look, your widowed sister-in-law has returned to her people and her gods." Return with your widowed sister-in-law. Naomi's word revealed a vital detail to the reader. Orpah had returned not only to her people, but also to her gods. She was content to remain a worshiper of Chemosh and other false gods. Was that how Ruth felt? Will I read? Look at this picture. As she faced Naomi on the lonely road, Ruth's heart was sure and clear. It swelled with love for Naomi and for the God whom Naomi served. So Ruth spoke, "Do not plead with me to abandon you, to turn back from accompanying you. For where you go, I shall go, and where you spend the night, I shall spend the night. Your people will be my people, and your God my God. Where you die, I shall die, and there is where I shall be buried. May Jehovah do so to me, and add to it, for anything but death should make a separation between me and you." And there you can see Ruth pleading with her mother-in-law. Okay. Ruth's words are remarkable, so much so that they have long outlived her, echoing down through some 30 centuries. They perfectly reveal a precious quality: loyal love. The love that Ruth felt was so strong and so loyal that she would stick with Naomi's people. She would stick with Naomi wherever she went. Only death could separate them. Naomi's people would become her own people. For Ruth was ready to leave behind everything she knew in Moab, even the Moabite gods. Unlike Orpah, Ruth could wholeheartedly say that she wanted Naomi's God, Jehovah, to be her own God as well. So they traveled on, just the two of them now, on the long road to Bethlehem. By one estimate, the journey might have taken as long as a week. Surely, though, each found in the company of the other some measure of comfort in the face of grief. There is no shortage of grief in this world. In our own times, which the Bible calls critical times hard to deal with, we face all manners of losses as well as grief. The quality we find in Ruth has thus become more important than ever: loyal love. The kind of love that holds on to its object and simply refuses to let go. It is a powerful force for good in this darkening world. We need it in marriage. We need it in family relations. We need it in friendships. We need it in the Christian congregation. As we cultivate that kind of love, we are imitating the outstanding example of Ruth. Now here's Ruth and Naomi in Bethlehem. It is of course one thing to put loyal love into words. It is quite another to prove the quality in action. Ruth had before her the opportunity to show her loyal love not only to Naomi but also to the God whom she chose as her own, Jehovah. The two women finally reached Bethlehem, a village about 6 miles south of Jerusalem. Naomi and her family, it seems, had once been quite prominent in that little town, for the whole place was buzzing with the news of Naomi's return. The women there would peer and say, "Is this Naomi?" Evidently, her sojourn in Moab had left her much changed. Her countenance and bearing showed the mark of years of hardship and grief. To those kinswomen and neighbors of years past, Naomi revealed how bitter her life had become to her. She even felt that her name should be changed from Naomi, which means my pleasantness, to Mara, which means bitter. Poor Naomi. Much like Job before her, she believed that Jehovah God had brought her hardships on her. As the two women settled into life in Bethlehem, Ruth began thinking about how best to take care of herself and Naomi. She learned that the law that Jehovah had given to his people in Israel included a loving provision for the poor. They were allowed to go into the fields at harvest time and follow the reapers, gleaning what was left behind as well as what grew at the edges and corners of the field. There's a footnote. It was a remarkable law, surely unlike anything Ruth knew in her homeland. In the ancient Near East, in those days, widows were treated badly. Notes on reference work. After her husband's death, normally a widow had to rely on her sons for support. If she had none, she might have to sell herself into slavery, resort to prostitution, or die. Back to it. Back to the story. It was time of the barley harvest, likely in April by our modern calendar, and Ruth went to the fields to see who would let her work under the provisions for gleaners. She chanced upon the fields of a man named Boaz, a wealthy landowner and a relative of Naomi's dead husband, Elimelech. Though the law gave her the right to glean, she did not take it for granted. She asked the young man in charge of the harvesters for permission to work. He granted it, and then Ruth got right to work. Imagine Ruth following the harvesters. As they cut through the barley with their flint sickles, she stooped to pick up what they dropped or left behind, bundled the stalks into sheaves, and carried them off to a spot where she could beat out the grain later. It was slow, tiring work, and it got harder as the morning wore on. Yet Ruth kept at it, stopping only to wipe the sweat from her brow and to eat a simple lunch in the house, likely a shelter, set up to provide shade for the workers. Ruth probably neither hoped nor expected to be noticed, but she was. Boaz saw her and asked the young foreman who she was. A remarkable man of faith, Boaz greeted his workers, some of whom may have been day laborers or even foreigners, with these words, "Jehovah be with you." And they responded in kind. This spiritually minded older man took a fatherly interest in Ruth. And here's a picture of Ruth. The next to the picture says, Ruth was willing to do hard, humble work to provide for herself and Naomi. And here she is, picking up the barley off the ground to feed herself and her mother-in-law. Boaz, calling Ruth my daughter, he advised her to keep coming to his fields to glean and to stay near the young women of his household to avoid being harassed by any of the workmen. He made sure that she had food to eat at lunchtime. Above all, though, he sought to command and encourage her. How so? When Ruth asked Boaz what she, a foreigner, had done to deserve his kind favor, he replied that he had heard about all that she had done for her mother-in-law, Naomi. Likely, Naomi had praised her beloved Ruth among the women of Bethlehem, and word had reached Boaz. He knew, too, that Ruth had turned to the worship of Jehovah, for he said, "May Jehovah reward the way you act, and may there come to be a perfect wage for you from Jehovah, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to seek refuge." How those words must have encouraged Ruth. She had indeed decided to take refuge under the wings of Jehovah God. Like a young bird securely nestled against a protective parent, she thanked Boaz for speaking to her so reassuringly, as she kept on working until evening fell. Ruth's faith in action is an excellent example for all of us today who struggle in these difficult economic times. She did not think that others owed her anything, so she appreciated everything that was offered her. She felt no shame in working long and hard to care for one she loved, even though it was humble work. She gratefully accepted and applied wise advice about how to work safely and in good company. Most important, she never lost sight of where her true refuge lay, with her protective Father, Jehovah God. If we show loyal love, as Ruth did, and follow her example in humility, industriousness, and appreciation, we'll find that our faith too will become a helpful example for others. How, though, did Jehovah provide for Ruth and Naomi? We will discuss the matter in the following chapter. The following chapter says, an excellent woman, and here's a picture of Ruth right there, and is continuing on Ruth. So Ruth is the name of your great-grandmother, and she's very much like the woman in the story. She provides for her family. My grandfather, I call him Tito Jorge. I call my grandma Tita Ruth. I'm named after him, and she, just like Ruth, was a widowed at a young age, and she persevered, and she became close to Jehovah, and I'm very proud to call her my grandmother and your great-grandmother. So that's it for Ruth for right now. Next week, we'll get back into the Learn from the Great Teacher book next Wednesday. I haven't got my schedule for work for next week, so I think hopefully I'll be able to make a video for you on Sunday. And let's see what else. It's not a green screen behind me, that's just my wall. I miss you, baby girl. It's amazing missing someone you've never met, but it is a very real feeling. And just know that I love you. It doesn't matter if I never meet you. It doesn't matter if I die before you meet me. I love you, and I want you to know that. So, Jehovah bless you, and I pray for you all the time. And Jehovah is the best father anyone could ever have. So even though I'm not there, I know Jehovah has your best interest in mind. So whatever you need, I'm sure that He is making sure that you get it. That's all for now, baby girl. And I hope I feel better, and I hope you're in good health. And I just love you so much. Bye.